So what I've stopped doing is being like, ew, that's small. Go away, you nasty man.
Okay,
because
so
they get off on the humiliation.
So
some
before
of them.
you would say, ew.
Yeah, before I'd be like, ew, that's small. Or like, I would just be like, you're gross. But some men they derive pleasure from the humiliation.
It's not going to be a fruitful endeavor in any way, shape, form to send a woman you guys correct me if I'm wrong, right? But I don't think women are as visually stimulated in the same way men are. Like you said earlier, I mean, if he's sending his bank account, might be a better thing to send as a picture.
Yeah, send me unsolicited money.
There you go.
Hello and welcome to Coming on Top, a podcast that dives deep into the world of sex, love, dating, relationships, and we also touch on the worlds of tech and culture. Each episode, we'll be tackling a different topic, looking at the highs, the lows, and everything in between. All those hard questions that you've always wanted to ask but were too afraid, we'll be answering them on this podcast. Joining me on today's show, I have got Chidera and Tre. Welcome, guys.
Hey.
Now, guys, I'm going to throw that awkward first date question. And I'm going to ask you guys to tell me about yourself. And I'm going to start with you, Chidera.
All right, so my name is Chidera. Mm-hmm. I'm popularly known online as the Slumflower. I am an author. I've written 2 books. One is called What a Time to Be Alone, and the other is called How to Get Over a Boy.
I'm going to need both of these.
Oh, girl, I got you.
And Tre, tell us all we need to know.
So my name's Tre Lowe. I'm a musician and a mentor. I'm one half of the band Architects. And I also mentor all sorts of people. I absolutely love it. And I had an incredible room on Clubhouse called Alpha Click where we spoke about all things to do with men. So it's great to be here to talk about this.
Lovely to have you both, guys. I'm so excited for today's episode, honestly. I feel like we've already done a whole episode before we started rolling, so let's save all those cute conversations for later. So before we get started, let's go online and see what's been going on in the world of sex and love with the buzz. Right, so guys, the internet is a wild place. Every day, I mean, I work in, as a sex educator, as you guys know, and even I can't keep up with some of the trends. Every day I'm like, what is this? Right, so over on TikTok, users are convinced that sea moss, do you guys know what sea moss is? Yeah. Sea moss, which is otherwise known as Irish moss as well, can not only improve with weight loss, but can increase your libido.
I heard this.
Yeah, so libido, if you're listening and you're wondering what that is, so basically there are foods and drinks that are known to increase your sex drive.
Like maca.
Oysters.
What's that?
Oysters?
Oysters.
Oysters make you horny.
Oysters make you horny, and they're one of the most popular ones, actually. That's like one of the classics. So
that's
oysters, red wine. I was going to say red chocolate. Red wine and dark chocolate. So those are like the 3 ones that people know.
Red wine specifically?
Red wine specifically. Yeah. There's something in red wine that increases testosterone levels. Yeah. And bananas. Yeah, the potassium in bananas is really good for you. Yeah. Sense. And watermelon. So if you're a man, one of the most important things that you can add to your diet is watermelon because it increases testosterone levels. Really good for the heart health. And have you guys heard of a TikTok trend called sunning your vagina?
Oh my God.
What is sunning your... Please don't tell me what I'm thinking.
Literally,
just spreading the...
Basically, sunbathing, but just for your genitals. So apparently this is supposed to...
So do you put sunscreen on the flaps? Like, do you...
Probably not, because you have a nice deep tan.
Well, think about it. If you're going out into the sun, we'll recommend to you sunscreen, right? Now, you never need to put sunscreen on your genitals, do you? Like, nobody...
Because it's not exposed to the sun.
Exactly. And there's no need for it to be. And everyone's fine, yeah? And no, everyone's fine. No one needs to do it. So putting sunscreen on your genitals is not good. So if you're out there and you're thinking, oh, I want to increase my vibrations, because apparently that's what it does. Increases your vibrations so that you can meet people who are on your sort of psychological vibe and level. Apparently this is what it does. But there's not a lot of research about this, guys. And you shouldn't be sunning your genitals. There's a lot that could go wrong. Sunburn.
Now, see, those are the TikTok influencers
the skin
may
there is
not be listening
different.
to.
The skin there is different, exactly. It's more sensitive, and you can't put sunscreen on it because that's going to lead to even more problems. Bacterial infections and all sorts of things. Blisters. And then you won't be able to have sex. So even if you do meet this person,
you can't
with the
even
same
vibe
vibe,
with them.
The vibes won't be vibesing.
Mindful sex.
Mindful sex, right. And then this is another one. Over in the tech world, the lioness vibrator company that is giving you hard data with your sex toys. So this was set up by a media superstar, so like an influencer, and it aims to empower its users both sexually and technically. So how do we feel? Because we know about, we all have a smartphone. How do we feel about smart toys? Is that a bit too far, a bit too invasive?
Well, how does a smart toy work? Does it like track how long it takes for you to like have
Yeah,
an
so
orgasm?
it pretty much, so how it works is it figures out how your body reacts to certain stimulants that the toy provides, and then it sort of keeps a memory and says, okay, well,
like a
Chidera
partner that
likes
knows what you
this.
like.
That's something.
Basically. Yeah, I mean, is this a good thing? Because are we almost replacing each other with technology? Is this
I
taking
think it's
one
not a
step too
bad
far?
thing, right? Because at some point we're going to have sex bots, isn't it? So is it a bad thing necessarily? Maybe that would solve some of the issues. Maybe it would solve issues like infidelity and God knows what. If you could, especially for men, right? Men get married and I don't know, often it's, don't kill me, guys. But often it might be the wife is like, right, goes off sex. And the man's left, what's he going to do? He either has to go and find Susie at the office or he has to find a sex bot. So I think it's quite a good development. Why not?
What about, you raised the question of, is this going to mean that we're not going to bond with our partners because we now have this toy? You can also use it with your partner. I think that combined will be cool. If like you have the data that your partner can now observe and then they can now understand the patterns of your pleasure in a way.
Pleasure.
Until your partner sees what you might actually be getting off on.
And they don't have
She
the
might not
means.
share your taste or
I know.
you might want to keep that quiet.
All right, guys. Now onto our main topic. So speaking of apps and technology, no app has revolutionized sex, dating, and relationships like good old Tinder. I'm just going to take it back just a little bit. So with your dating history, have any of you guys ever tried dating apps?
Yes.
I have, yeah.
Which ones have you tried, Chidera?
I've briefly tried Tinder years ago, came off that very quickly. Tried Hinge. I've tried Bumble.
Bumble is the one that the woman approaches the man.
Yeah,
Is that
that's
right?
the first move. Yeah.
Yes,
First
and it
move,
has
yeah.
a friends feature as well.
And it
where
has
you
a friends
can just,
feature.
like,
That's right. And
chinwag.
so I think because Tinder was one of the first dating apps that revolutionized dating, and because it then got a lot of backlash. So you just said I was on it and then I bounced within no time. So I think other apps have then seen, okay, people don't want this, people don't want to hook up, and then they've tried different ways of appealing to people and in a better way. And so do we think that sort of giving women the power to choose who they want to date, is that a good thing? Or as a man, Trey, is that emasculating, or would you prefer, instead of like going through swiping 120 times before you get one like, is it better for the woman to make the
I
first
think
move?
it's good because I think if a woman's doing that, she's much more likely to be serious about it at the end of the day. Because there's a lot of ghosting that people go through. I think men are used to being ghosted. And me personally, I love powerful, strong women. So I think a woman that's made up her mind, I want to date you, it's just going to be a lot more serious than you just going from one to the other. I think it's actually a very, very, very good thing. But I understand there'd be some women that probably wouldn't want to do that. Yeah.
Have you ever approached a guy like on an app?
Well, when I used to use Bumble,
Yeah.
that was the way that the app was built. So I would, but it's not really my thing. Now I use an app called Field, Feeld, because some people spell it as field, like, running on a field. And what I like about that app is that because the framework of the app is built on like encouraging conversations surrounding kink, my bio makes it very clear that I prefer men who are open to being of service to women. And so usually when men start conversations with me, the starting line is, "Goddess, how can I serve you? Hi, Goddess. Oh my God. Can I be your sub?" And the thing is, like,
So which app is this?
Oh my God, now you join it.
Just
Is
for
that not-
a couple of
Okay,
friends that might
Is that
be
not a bit of a turn
interested.
off though?
not if he's also intellectual and genuinely, from speaking to him, it sounds like I'm not the first woman that he's come across who he's done this with, in terms of this is something that he's used to doing and he enjoys being of the lifestyle. Because what I'm turned off by is men who, I'm not saying it's a bad thing for it to be your first time wanting to be of service to a powerful woman, but a lot of these men, when you look at their bios, it says that they're dominant, and then they've come to you knowing that you're a dominant woman, and it's almost like they want a power tussle. That's what I stay away from. So I feel like in my experience with dating apps, I prefer dating apps or any kind of infrastructure where there's room for you to describe yourself as authentically as you can be. So for me, like, I don't feel weird about making it clear that I prefer men who want to be of service to me, because there are loads of men out there who think that way and are happy to do that.
Yeah,
but you won't find them if you don't make it clear that you are of that
you're
similar.
of that. Yeah. Because how many men are going to realistically say, yeah, I just want to be of, you know?
Yeah, they're actually embarrassed.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of judging people.
Is that something for you that you'd want it to lead to like marriage, and is that the kind of?
I don't even think I want to get married. I don't think I want to get married. For me, I'm used to having like multiple men in my life doing a similar thing for me. I've had guys be like, oh, can I come and like tidy your flat for you? Can I rub your feet?
What?
I need to go back to the drawing board. I don't know what is going on.
This isn't even the most.
So wait, you go on this dating app, and a guy will come around with an apron and a little duster and start tidying up your flat.
Well, the thing is, I've actually never had any of the guys I've interacted with in this manner come to my flat. Like I never.
But
take
in
up
theory, you could.
But in theory,
I could. I would like they would happily do it. Like they get something out
What
of
did
it.
they get out of that?
They just enjoy the feeling of knowing that I'm standing over them, being like, "Can you go back there and clean it again?"
It's a more common thing than you would think.
Submission thing.
Do we think that dating apps, do they add more pressure on a first date? Because a first date is hard anyway, even if you've met the person. But with a dating app, you're like, are they going to look like the pictures? So or is it
FaceTime
easier?
first?
Is it easier meeting somebody that you've never met and there's no sort of preconceived ideas or? What do we think?
I mean, I think by the time you go on a date, you'd have exchanged a couple of.
You'd think.
So you get a sense of it. I mean, I think one of the dangers for me when I've done Tinder is people may not look like what they say they look like.
Very common.
Details about that. But it's interesting, I think, with it, because you can get to know the person. You could potentially even research them a little bit, you know, in terms of social media. I think that's a good thing to weed out, but I think it's making people lazy, and I think it's giving people the illusion of choice. And the more
access.
choice you've got, then the more likely you are to not be satisfied with whatever you've got. And I think that's the issue. I think a better way would be, especially from a male point of view, is to have men be really clear about who they are and therefore what they want, because that's why a lot of these apps are just hooking up things out. Men will say whatever it takes.
So I've got some interesting statistics about Tinder, right? So Tinder has 66 million users. Of those 66 million, a whopping 78% are male and only 22% are women. Now, I'm shocked, but I'm not shocked. Like, of course, yeah, I pretty much we can guess that it's probably going to be more men, right?
Men have to graft.
Men have to graft.
Yeah,
you do have to
graft.
sort of make, traditionally. But I didn't realize that it was that big of a difference. Are we shocked by that, or is that what you thought?
No, men have to graft. I mean, the other stat to add to that is that the 8% of women go for the top 20% of men.
Yeah.
So now there's poor guys grafting in terms of the numbers are already skewed against them. Then it gets even like a double whammy, because women that are there are probably not looking at the majority of men that are on there. But again, it's just the reality of modern men. Men have to graft, and they're just used to that. And I think that's what makes dating apps not good.
Yeah.
Because it's just going to foster more frustration. You're grafting away with chance of success mathematically is low anyway. And it just reinforces this sense of I'm not enough, because people are swiping based on these superficial things, just on the way you look. A couple of pictures. It's like, is that what a relationship is? Just this external? And I'm not going to be like all kumbaya about it. Of course, we are visual creatures. That's just normal, right? But there's no depth. There's no sense of who the person is.
So guys, if we look back at the dating of history and how we used to meet and connect compared to today, what do we think? Is it better now that you're now in control of who you can meet online? Or do we prefer the old school way of maybe having, input from maybe friends and family?
I would say personally, I prefer the old school way. I think if you look at studies showing loneliness, you look at dissatisfaction, you look at the 50% divorce rates, especially in the Western world, I think we're missing out on that old school way of families meeting families, having matchmakers like they do in Asian cultures, in African cultures, where they make sure that the family is compatible. And they also have this sense of, now that you're married, you have elders as well. So you have a way of dealing with the relationship issues, which inevitably comes up. I think the whole thing around apps is it typifies this throwaway culture that we're in. Do you know? You'll have a relationship for a bit, it's not working out, after 2 years, get rid of them. And the whole system is geared up for that to happen, as opposed to the old way of almost like the village put you together, and the village is going to make sure you stay together for the good of the kids as well. And I think it's quite sad what's happening with that, because it's just made everything really cold and soulless a little bit. And then, like I said earlier, everyone has this illusion of choice. The problem with choice is when something's not working, I'll choose something else. The grass is greener. I'll choose something else. The grass is greener. But the grass isn't greener. And the other thing it does as well is it means that you then don't focus on your growth. Your issues is always there. She's a B, he's a B. There's no sense of what can I be responsible for? How can I grow? Is there something with my inner child or something that I haven't dealt with, or my style of communication? How can I grow? It's just no, swipe next, swipe next, swipe next, swipe next. And I think inevitably people are going to become sadder and sadder and lonelier and lonelier. And no sex robot in the world is going to
replace human interaction.
It's going to fill that void. And I think that's one of the dangers of apps. And apps, I don't think, care about fixing that, because if you fix that, there's no need for an app. If you found a partner, you don't need an app.
No.
I think app needs to perpetuate this sense of dissatisfaction, so you get back on the app and you keep swiping. I might be conspiracy theorist when I say that, but it's in their interest for you not to be happy, just like any social media app. They need to get you hooked on stuff that really does nothing for your life.
So nowadays, most, if not all the apps have like a subscription model that you can plan, or even like a one-off payment that you can make to sort of boost your profile. So it's almost like a pay-to-win situation, which sounds very transactional, doesn't it? Now, do we think that that's a good thing in a way? Because then if you're paying for something, if somebody's willing to pay for a service, does that mean that they're more likely to be serious about their intention, have good intentions, and they're actually like, you know what, I want to invest in a relationship, so I'm willing to pay X amount of money to boost my profile? Or is it just creating almost like a class divide, and it's like basically love is now almost like a luxury for people who can afford it?
What's interesting as well about the payment function is that apps like Tinder, for example, will create this interesting scarcity mindset where you will be told that 400 people have swiped you, but you're not allowed to see who those 400 people are until you pay for the subscription. And then when you now pay for the subscription to see the said 400 people, it's just like it's not even worth the money. And what I think about the question of, has love become a luxury? Have we commodified romance? Is I think this is more reflective of the society we're living in, and apps or not, there is always going to be a human desire to foster connection and we want to feel love. But the thing is, as capitalism continues to evolve and become more dominant in our society, we will be continuously interacting with romance in a way that's more mechanical and digital, in the sense of, the conversation of, well, does that make things transactional then if you're paying on a dating app to meet people? My argument against that is, dating apps or not, there are still quote unquote transactional interactions between two people that are interested in each other. For example, sex work exists, or there are men who just are generous and enjoy giving women money. And some people argue that that kind of framework is transactional, which automatically means that it's not genuine. But I don't think all transactions are bad. When it comes to dating apps, though, I feel like there is an interesting thing about the relationship we have with dopamine and dating apps when it comes to, you've seen that this many people have matched you. It's an ego boost.
Of course.
And I think dating apps are almost like a pacifier for adults, where if you're feeling a bit low on self-esteem, you can open a dating app and there will always be someone there who wants you.
Oh, it's a great massage for your ego, isn't it?
Right, but it's so temporary, because then you'll then go and swipe back on the person who wants you. You see, like what Trey was saying, you see what you don't like and then you immediately swipe off them, and that ego boost has quickly run out, and it's just insatiable.
Do you think that dating apps have made us a little bit more brutal and harsh? I mean, ghosting is like, people just ghost each other like it's nothing. And without even any sort of thought of, how that could affect somebody's mental health or emotional well-being. What do you think about this, Trey? Do you think ghosting is the easiest way to just let the situation go, or is it better to just?
I think so. I mean, I look at it from 2 points of view. From a mental point of view, I'm a firm believer in you're responsible for your own emotions personally. So if someone's ghosting you, you're responsible for that, not the other person necessarily. You need to deal with that, because you may never know why. They just did what they did, and you need to be responsible for that. But I think, obviously, apps do make it easier. You wouldn't necessarily ghost someone in real life in that way if you knew them. You might give a bit of an explanation, or if they're, do you know what I mean? It's a bit different. I think apps is just making it easier to be cold, because apps by definition are quite cold. Is that what you said earlier? Apps are almost like slot machines. It's almost like giving you this reward for bad behavior, and it wants you to come back for more. unlock this level and you get this. It's like a video game, then unlock that level. It's almost designed to make you unsatisfied, so you keep coming back to it. And ghosting the same. If you ghosted, it's almost like this, what do they call it? It's almost like this cognitive distance a little bit. You feel like incomplete. So you go back there again, you go back again. You might even be addicted to the pain of it, but you go back. Either way, it has you go back. For the bottom line for Tinder, whoever it is, for their shareholders, they don't care as long as you're using the app.
As long as you keep coming
back. Is that
back.
what you said? 10 years ago, they probably did want people to have successful relationships, but they've worked out if people have successful relationships, where's our customer
Got
base?
no job, yeah. Okay, guys, so we can't talk about dating apps without going down, addressing the dark side of dating apps, right? So we asked women, not we, but someone online asked women between the ages of 18 and 34 about dating online. And 57% said that they'd received sexually explicit messages or images that they hadn't asked for. So the question is, how can dating apps make it safer for women? Because we've all had those unsolicited dick pics in the DMs, and you're talking about a conversation that has absolutely nothing to do with this, with that at hand, and before you know it. So how can dates make it safer for women?
God, you'd have to, I guess, educate the men, isn't it? I don't know. I mean, it's so alien to me, the thought of sending a dick pic. Why? Makes no sense whatsoever. I think it's educating men, and I think there's so many things, isn't it, we were speaking about earlier. I think one of them might just be the frustration of men. One of it is probably the fact that, again, it's not this... I mean, a guy's not going to whip it out in real life, would he? And there's something about being online where people's moral compass just goes completely off. So there's got to be that education, but there's also maybe got to be a self-examination with men. And I say it to a lot of women. I think a lot of young men don't have much leadership because it's not going to be a fruitful endeavor in any way, shape, form to send a woman you guys correct me if I'm wrong, right? But I don't think women are as visually stimulated in the same way men are. Like you said earlier, I mean, if he's sending his bank account, might be a better thing to send as a picture.
Yeah, send me unsolicited money.
There you go. Rather than a dick pic. So I think it's an educational thing with men. But I don't know, men are probably doing it just to get the rise or to... They're bored or...
Now, Chidera, I know that you've of course you've been on dating apps and you've had a positive experience. So I'm sure you've had your fair share of dick pics.
I've got some dick pics, not even just on dating apps. I've had dick pics on Instagram. Like, men will find a way.
How do you deal with it? So, and especially when it's coming from somebody that you actually do like. So how do you deal with receiving a dick pic?
Well, I've never received an unsolicited... asked for a dick pic. I wouldn't say I've asked for a dick pic, but I have engaged in the part. This is in my heyday back in the day when I was like 21, 22.
How did it go? Because I'm curious as to how that was.
So like, I didn't ask him for a dick pic, but we were sending
flirty messages.
Attachments. We had no business sending each other. Some JPEGs were exchanged. But it's not that I asked him for it, but I wasn't angry that I received it.
Fine.
But it wasn't the naked. It was like, grey joggers print. Very that.
Oh, when is the summer again?
But that's the equivalent of sundress season for guys. Like, guys
yeah,
love a
basically,
sundress.
how you guys love a sundress?
Yeah.
We love a grey jogger. Not gonna
So
lie.
it was very that.
Yeah, but I feel like that's okay because like.
It was consensual.
It's consensual, and you have to you can gauge the conversation. Like you can tell when you can do that.
It makes sense. Yeah,
I'm talking about the ones.
But when
who
I've
just
received
from
out of nowhere, what I've stopped.
How do you deal with that?
So what I've stopped doing is being like, "Ew, that's small. Go away, you nasty man."
Okay,
because
so
they get off on the humiliation.
So
some
before
of them.
you would say, "Ew,"
before I'd be like, "Ew, that's small," or like I would just be like, "You're gross." But some men they derive pleasure from the humiliation.
Yeah.
So now I just block them.
Yeah.
Because even though they might get something out of me blocking them, well, it's not going to be as much you'd get if I was to tell you that it's small or it's revolting.
Right. So guys, I asked my audience, I put a poll to my audience and asked them some of their experiences of dating apps. And I asked them, do you think dating apps set an unrealistic expectations? So 84% said yes and 16% said no. So why do you think, what is it about dating apps that sets unrealistic expectations?
Again, for me, obviously you got the obvious ones, right? Mm-hmm. With the way you can doctor your face and blah, 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 blah. I mean, I've been on dates and the person doesn't look like the person. I've walked past the table 5 times. I'm like,
wait, what?
Yeah,
you was catfished?
Yeah, because you're thinking, she looks totally... See, because men don't have makeup and all that kind of stuff in the same sort of way. So we're more or less going to look-ish. I think the one way that a man's going to lie is going to be about his height, right? Yeah. But women will lie... I'm just going to say it because I know some people but women will lie about their weight. That's probably one of the biggest ones that they will. Yeah. Like you see the picture and you just think, I wish you just said the truth, but there might be 3 or 4 dress sizes bigger than what they were. The face would have been, everything's different, so you literally don't recognize them. And then you're faced with, do you just go through the date as normal, or do you just tell the truth? You look very, very different. So that's one of the obvious thing where it's like inauthenticity, I guess, behind it. I don't know. What about you?
I think what's interesting with like dating apps now and lack of authenticity is that like someone can look like their pictures and you meet them, but then upon having a conversation with them, you realize that the energy you were getting in the dating app is not really the same in person. Like they probably were exaggerating the things that they know that you liked about them so that you could go and meet them. Then you've now spent time with them and you're like, oh, you find yourself kind of daydreaming while they're talking or
drifting off. You're just not focused.
Yeah, you're not feeling it because the spark.
And some people are just more. Again, it's a bit weird, right? Because I think a lot of men are intimidated by women, and it's easy to have banter when a woman's not in front of you. But when she's there,
why do you think they're
all your
intimidated?
insecurities. Oh God, how long have you guys got to talk about why men are intimidated? I mean, first of all, a man's going to be intimidated because he's going to be thinking he's not good enough in this modern world. I do think there's a crisis of masculinity with a lot of men. A man's also going to think like, God, this is my 3rd or 4th or 5th date, because a man's having to graft much more than a woman is. Men have got, a lot of modern men as well, and I think maybe with the younger generation, they don't have this sense of, because so many people spend so much time on their phone, that kind of general person-to-person interaction is not there. So on that phone is very different from, you're dealing with all the nuances of human, do you know what I mean? Interaction, face movements, this one, that, expressions, blah, blah, all this sort of stuff comes into it. And suddenly people are thinking, I'm not really equipped for this. And then you're literally meeting a stranger. It doesn't seem like that when you're doing all the smiley faces, but now when you meet them, you're like, I actually don't know you. And I think it affects men a lot more than women, because I think men are tasked with performing more than women are, especially your average guy.
Yeah.
Now, your top 10, 20% of guys who are players, it's a bit different for them. Maybe it reverses. But for your average normal guy, he's thinking, and it's an investment like we spoke about earlier. He's investing hard currency in that relationship.
So I asked on my online audience as well, what is important to you in a dating app? And one of the things, it's one of the most common things that came up, is if they banned heavily filtered pictures. Now, going back to what you said, Tre, about, people overly filtering themselves online on their dating profiles to the point where you have to walk past them 5 times. Now, and then you also said that with men, one of the most common things is, men lie about their height, which is another thing. So that's another point that a lot of women said is men lying about their height. Now, what I've noticed online, on social media, dating apps, or even just open conversations online, is that women were quite happily and boldly say, I don't date a guy who's not over 6 foot, who's not 6 foot or over, right? And no one says anything.
Nope.
It's completely fine. It's like, that's her preference. It's absolutely fine. Now, Tre, of course, I'm going to ask you, being the man here, how does that make men feel, do you think?
The height thing, I mean, for some personally, right, I've had a lot of, growing up, I had body dysmorphia. I'm not like the tallest in the world. And for a long time, I thought I wasn't worthy of it. And it's quite worthy of dating, being shorter than 6 foot and the rest of it. It's very, very hard on men because you can't change your height. And I think there's a double standard where men tend to look at a woman's weight, for instance.
Right.
You might not be thin enough, you might not be thick enough, whatever your cultural background is. But that stuff is transformable. It's very, very hard for men. Because there are the average height of a man in this country, I think it's 5'9" or something.
5'9", yeah.
Which means there are so many men that are out there thinking they're not good enough. And a lot of women, especially the apps, I don't know if they still do it on apps where you can actually filter in terms of height. So there are a lot of good men who don't even have a shot at it, whereas you can't filter on weight, for instance. Because it's seen as, how
because
dare
it's like,
you do that?
no, that's discrimination.
But, but it doesn't make sense because a man can't change his height unless he goes and does surgery. I actually researched this. That's how bad it was for me when I was a lot younger. You have to cut your leg bones, you stretch it out. You're in a wheelchair for ages, and then they stretch your bones in your lower leg to make you taller, right? That's the drastic level, whereas weight is a very different thing. So it's a double standard, which is another thing that makes most men on dating apps unsuccessful. It's quite sad. You're going onto an app pretty much knowing that you're going to be unsuccessful. It's a sad thing. I think it's a double standard that definitely needs to change, but it won't do.
So when I asked my audience online about, what they would like to see in dating apps, somebody said that if the government were to ban them, we can connect properly again. So on one hand, it's like, yeah, it's great because you can, meet people that traditionally you probably wouldn't have never crossed paths with. But what you find is that, and when you have real conversations with people, most people would actually prefer to meet somebody in real life.
Yeah.
I would, for sure.
Right?
I feel like nothing beats... Do you know what's interesting? It's because you could meet the same person on a dating app, right?
in real life.
And the impression you have of them will be dramatically different.
Totally, yeah.
And that's what I'm so fascinated by, because there are guys who I've met in real life who I've gone on to fancy and probably date. But I know that if I had swiped them on a dating app, I probably wouldn't have swiped them based on just like the immediate impression. It could be that the way they've articulated the description of their self has given me the impression they're not that interesting. Or it could be that the pictures that they uploaded are... like, why do guys have the worst pictures of themselves on dating apps?
No, guys are terrible.
What is going on?
Like 10 of them in a picture, or
Their faces
them in a gym, them topless. It's like...
Like, it's so terrible and off-putting. But I think for me, as I get older, I'm more drawn to meeting people in person. That's why I go to, I mentioned earlier that I use a particular dating app that's like more on the kink side. Now I prefer going to kink events, because those same men who are on those apps are at the events. And I feel like when I actually get to meet someone in person, I can get a feel for their body language. I can get a feel for how much they like me as a person. And it means that if we are to continue communication afterwards, yes, that would be digital communication, whether it's text messaging or swapping socials, but I've gotten to meet you. And that for me is very important context, because more times than not, there are guys who I might briefly connect with on a dating app and things are going well, but they might say something that just makes me feel funny, and I'll just not meet them based on that. And it's like, that's a whole opportunity gone, because I don't want to put myself in a position as a woman where it's dangerous to meet men, especially in the world of kink. I'm not saying kink in itself is dangerous, but society we live in already puts women in a place of danger. So it means that I have to be way more vigilant. So ultimately, I do believe that all dating apps, no matter how evolved they are, they're all going to still redirect to the place of meeting that person. Like, the purpose of dating apps is to still meet in person.
Still meet in person, yeah. As like we say, the gender roles become a little bit more skewed, and women are better educated, their earning prospects are a lot much better. And actually in the UK, your average 20-something-year-old woman makes more than your average 20-something-year-old man. And so... we're getting what we asked for, ladies, right? We're getting what we asked for. We're getting more money. We're getting, but has that now, are we now being unrealistic? Do women need to change their criteria of what they're looking for online
100%.
dating to match where we are in society?
100%. Well, look, I ran a room and we had about 10 to 15,000 people in the space of a year. And I think what women go through, especially with hypergamy, is unrealistic, but not even is it unrealistic, just mathematically,
Can you
you're probably
explain
going to be...
hypergamy for those who don't know?
Yeah,
hypergamy is when you want someone on your level or higher. Women tend to be hypergamous in every way, but certainly in earning, because earning is your modern day.
So your social, economical...
so a woman,
status.
say, for instance, wouldn't go and date the person who's serving them coffee. A man would probably marry that woman, no problem, because a man's always like, I'm going to try and be the provider, so I'm all right. Whereas women want someone on a level or higher, or someone that's tall and all the rest of it. So every woman that I've, say, coached or mentored, once I add all of their criteria into it, I'm like saying, do you know you're going for the top 2%? Are you ready for the competition? And because of the competition, are you what they want?
Yeah.
And it's not something that people think about. And because of some of the conversations where even me, I've got a big mouth, but even I'm thinking about what am I going to say? How's it going to come across? So no one's speaking truth. So when we talk about someone like, who we were talking about earlier, who, God rest his soul.
Kevin Samuels.
Kevin Samuels, for instance. But a lot of the advice, if you can take away some of the sensationalism from it, is real. When he's going through these women, and I might get crucified for saying it, but he's going through what men are thinking about.
Yeah.
What's your age? How many kids have you got? What's your weight? You may not want to hear that. Even some of Andrew Tate's up will talk about body count and all that kind of stuff. I doesn't really necessarily bother me, but a lot of men are bothered by that. Women
Why do you think that is?
Oh God, some of that's so biological, isn't it? Body count. I mean, some
But
of that's
what is
going back to-
biological about how many people that I've
Because
slept with?
back in the days, a man would want to know that he is the father, the offspring. I mean, even animals are exactly the same. If a new lion comes into pride, or murder all the young cubs.
But if we're not trying to have kids, why are you
I know, but I
pressed?
think some of it's just biological.
Biological.
A man who's had sex with lots of women is seen as a stud. If a woman does it, she's seen as the S word. It's how it is. And some men will just completely not bother. They'd rather date a virgin. I don't understand it, but a lot of men are just like
They
that.
want an
Just-
experienced virgin.
it's
But according
where it
to the
is. Maybe some of it
statistics-
is about dominance.
Going back to the statistics that we were covering earlier about, 80% of the men on dating, 80% of people on dating apps are male. Are men in a position to even be picking about
Don't
you've
mind
slept with this
them.
many? Because it's like, okay.
No, and that's true. Men need to get a bit realistic.
It's like, okay, men, but
yeah.
You are beggars with.
But I think
not
it's.
much
I, mean, I
you
think
know?
maybe it's a bit easier for men because men have to go out there and date. Whereas I know a lot of women who are waiting for the guy to come to them. So if someone that's actually going out and proactively
And doing the work.
there's a chance they're going to find someone. And I don't think men are as picky necessarily because hypergamy doesn't affect them as much. They will date someone who may have not ticked their boxes. I don't know many men with massive lists. And this is someone who spoke to thousands of people that I've coached and mentored. Their lists don't seem to be as long as some of the lists that women have. So
What do you frequently see on the list for men? On average?
Being faithful, being attractive, definitely.
Being faithful.
Yeah, being faithful
okay.
would be something there. Being attractive would be something. Men value peace. I don't think women get how much men value peace. That's one thing I got from doing our rooms. Men will take peace and being honoured or respected over love. And women don't realise how important that is. Just peace. Come home from work and you just chilled. You're not being art stuff or can you do this or blah, blah. Men just want peace. And that's another thing that men will look for. A woman that's just going to be quite chilled. It's very, very important rather than a woman that's going to be quite in your face or asking you stuff or maybe overly needy and the rest of it. It's just, I think it's women really getting a sense of what men want, but men also getting a sense of what women are. The days of old, you're not going to get those women. Those days are gone. Forget these traditional stuff. Deal with what is rather than what you want. And that's something I think some men are not being realistic about.
Oftentimes that comes from a breakdown of communication as well, and just people not being able to. Because men would say, "Oh, be my, I want peace, be my peace," but then you're not communicating your feelings, your emotions. You don't put the time in. You're not making the effort. And so for a woman, it's like, well, what you want to come home and me not bother, but my needs are being neglected.
That's the number one thing I think men don't do well. I think is communication.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the things that kills relationship. And that's why 80%
So it sounds like we're
of marriages are
nagging,
initiated by
but
women.
really we're just trying to get something out of the emotion.
Men are not hearing. And I think that's why I think both men and women need to do the work. And the work is doing that inner work on themselves. Find out what's actually who you are. And then get a sense of who you're with so you can communicate in a way. Because no one's going to tick every box. Relationships, I mean, my parents have been married for 60 years or something. They've only done that by being able to communicate and there are some things about you I'm never going to like, but I accept them and vice versa. And it's that. Whereas, like I say, act just fosters a sense of if I don't like it, next. If I don't like it, next. If I don't like it, next. You get to the point there is not much next for you. Yeah, you get to the point where your options are getting less and less and less and less and less. Do you know, so communication's key.
Communication's key to life, the key to life. And Chidera, my darling, what would you like to see with changes to not only just Tinder, but just dating apps in general?
Dating apps might not be a thing in future.
Do we think there's too many options now, or like in terms of dating apps? We've established that there's probably not a lot of options when you are on the app to date, but just even the apps alone, just the sheer volume of how many apps
I think there
are
are too many options because we aren't even supposed to know this many people exist, let alone have the choice to date.
I think there are two. I think what we need to see is probably more niche, and like say Raya, for instance.
Right, yeah.
I think you need to see.
Raya.
I mean, I like Raya because Raya is got two sides. It's got dating, but it's also got.
There.
I know because everyone thinks they're too cool.
That's
the issue.
But what I mean is, at least it's a niche thing. I mean, like you say, if they can create some way of doing prompts or something like that. But I think you're going to see more niching.
Yeah, like the app I'm talking about field.
More. You're going to get to see more people niching. So people who've got big interest, I don't know, say you're into environmentalism, there's going to be an environmental app. Or maybe Tinder starts to split where you are genuinely into something and only you who are into that thing will be in that part of Tinder. I think that probably needs to happen. Because there's too many nuances now with people.
I agree with that idea. I like the idea. I mean, I already use a dating app that's more like for people in the kink community. It's like, I think we're moving to... And I think when we look at society now, we are seeing a lot of subgroups bubbling up where people are forming communities with people who share an identity with them or a political ideology with them. We're seeing a lot more of that niche mentality growing where people align more with those who think in the same way they do. So it does make sense for dating apps to move in a direction where instead of everybody being forced into the same pool, rather there are dating apps for people who have a particular mindset or dating apps for people in their 40s. I mean, I've seen Muslim dating apps. I've seen like
Christian
mingle. All of that.
And I think there probably needs to be a split. I mean, I don't know if it's been done formally, but between hookup apps, do you know what you're getting? Plenty of Fish is pretty much like that. Tinder's pretty much like that. And
but there are now like specific hookup apps. For like, we're here to hook up.
Yeah. But then with the get married apps, there are a lot of men who be lying that they want to get married just so they can have sex with you.
Yeah. It's a hard one, isn't it? Because you're relying on authenticity, but the very nature of these apps means you're never going to be authentic. And if you were, your competitiveness is going to decrease if you're very authentic. So unfortunately, everyone lies.
And, going back to what you said before, Trey, I think when it comes to dating apps, you can't control other people. The only thing you can control is yourself. So you just have to kind of, and if you are into dating apps and you're thinking, okay, or if you've been on dating apps and you've had, just a horrible experience, or you've been swiping to the point where your thumbs are just raw and you're thinking maybe there's something wrong with me, or, there's nothing wrong with you. We've established that dating apps only really work for a small percent of men.
People, exactly.
And those men, by the time their egos have been massaged and they,
and women as well.
And women. There are women, of course, that are successful, but as a collective, there's only a small number of people there, and that's the 20% of men. And those are the ones that you're probably not going to meet. So if you are a man and you're thinking there's something wrong with me, there's nothing wrong with you. And if you're a woman thinking all men are trash no, there are really good men out there. We maybe need to review what we consider to be valuable or a high value.
We need
man.
to reevaluate that. Exactly.
Reevaluate.
I think we've
and
all got unrealistic expectations.
Yeah, and go back to the drawing board and think, what is it that I want in a relationship?
Yeah. Well, before you go there, who am I?
And who am I?
That's the first thing to us. Who actually am I?
And work on yourself.
Then what is it
and think,
I
why
want?
would someone want to date me?
And then what do they want? And am I it?
Yes,
And if I want to be it, what work do I need to do to be that? That's the most authentic thing to do. It's the most honest way to do it.
Because if you have to change yourself fundamentally to be what the person you're attracted to wants, then maybe you should review who you're attracted to.
Oh, of course, because you can only act for so long, right? Eventually, you.
But it'll be more the
yourself.
attributes if you're in alignment with it. So if, I don't know, say a woman wants a man that's harder working or earns a certain amount of money. If that aligns with your own personal goals and values, fine. But if you're just doing it for her, no, that's the worst thing to ever do. Because you're trying to just create yourself as some perfect thing for someone, and the minute you do that, you're not in your world, you're in theirs. They'll get bored,
and then eventually you end up resenting that person because you get
passive aggressive, and a lot of men are in that space where they're passive aggressive because they're not communicating their needs. They then feel like undervalued, and they become passive aggressive, and then the relationship breaks down.
And they cheat, and then the relationship breaks down, and all the rest of it.
It's communication, and that's why I think apps fundamentally are in many ways the death of a lot of relationships. Because they're not about authenticity at their core. They're not about communication. So it's just going to get worse
and worse. So I remember you guys, I asked you what your best and worst dates were. So I put the same question to my audience, and boy, oh boy, they did not disappoint. Okay, so somebody said, when I got to the bar, there was another girl. He was on another date that clearly ran over. He asked me to wait on the other side. It gets better. He asked me to wait on the other side of the bar and that he'd come and get me when he'd finished.
What?
And like an idiot, I did.
Interview.
She waited.
She waited.
Do you know what? That's happened to me before, I wouldn't get dragged for this, but I went on a date with a guy, and then the second date I had, it was the same place that I chose. So thankfully the two guys didn't see each other. They just about missed each other, but I was sweating towards the end of the date. So I was like, oh my God,
But you know what though? In a way, isn't that speed dating? Is anything wrong with that?
Yeah, but speed dating is okay because you know that we're all here to do the same thing. But if I'm like, oh Trey, I'll meet you at 7, at all bar 1. And I get there, and Chidera's there, and you're just like, do you know what, Sarah? Hang on a minute.
I don't want to see you on the other day.
You don't call me, I'll call you.
Unless you gave a damn good explanation of it. Yeah, no, that would be a
job interview. You got
it feels like a job interview, right? Yeah. But then she, bless her, because then she said like an idiot. Oh, clearly she thought about it, and I wouldn't stay. But I think in that moment, you almost.
So wait, she stayed for the date?
She waited until he.
She waited for her turn, basically.
See, if that was me, I would just come and be going.
But she's got dressed up.
Go meet someone.
That's what I'm thinking. Come all the way.
She could just met someone else that night. She's already dressed up, wearing her makeup. Go to another bar and sit down. Someone will talk to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't waste your makeup.
No, that was. I definitely wouldn't hang around. I would just be like. I don't think I would even say anything. I'll just turn around and walk out.
I would turn around and walk out.
Yeah.
I'm not
and then
explaining
block him
myself.
on the dating app
gone.
quickly.
Okay, so another story that I got sent in my DMs was I went on a Hinge date, but realised I didn't fancy him, so I kept ordering shots, which is funny because a lot of people just get drunk through a bad date. Throughout the night, he got way too drunk, and later on, I was rudely awakened him by him pissing in my wash basket.
Wait, he's in her house?
He's in her house. So I don't, anyway. I had to hot wash my clothes at 4 a.m. and everything. So tragic.
First of all, how did this man enter her house?
Have you ever been drunk on a date? Have you ever had to drink yourself just to get through into fancying somebody?
I'm not a heavy drinker, so I feel like for me, if I don't already fancy a guy and I start drinking, I'll start to feel more anxious and I'll start to feel like I fancy him less and less.
So it works the opposite way for you, right? And yourself, Trey?
To fancy the person, drink more. I think, yeah, but not necessarily to fancy them, but just to get more into the vibe of it.
Yeah.
See, because for me, even if I go on a date and I don't fancy the person, I still love people.
Yeah.
So
What's your star sign?
Capricorn.
Oh, I'm surprised by that.
Yeah, I love people, so I will still drink just to get into the flow of it, because I still want to, I talk a lot, as you know, right? I want to get a sense of who they are, what they're up to. It doesn't matter whether we have this romantic connection or not, but I still want to get a sense of them.
Right.
So I drink to just get into the flow of it sometimes, but that was way back in the day. So
Have you ever cut a date short just because you're like, okay, definitely don't fancy you and I don't want to be here, so I'm just going to wrap this up and go?
Yeah, if they're boring.
I feel like you guys are going to hate me for this. But one time, and I've not done this again since, but one time I went on a date, it was, I don't even remember, I think it was Hakkasan or something. We only went for drinks. And I went to the toilet and I pretended I was going to the toilet and I just never came back.
Yeah,
Oh my God,
the silence is speaking volumes.
No, he won't. No, he won't.
Bill this whole time. He's sending it to you, boy.
I'm
Plus
like
interest.
the 15th woman he
Cost
must
of
have gone on
living
a date
interest.
with that
But
week.
you know what? Because you're like, oh God, this is terrible. I can't believe I'm going to
Yeah.
say. Listen, so many people have done this. Do you know how many people I know who are like, I just had to get out of there? And I think it's, do you know what I think
Your
it is?
face.
I think if a bloke did that to a woman, it's
Oh,
worse, though, especially if he invited
Oh
her.
man, they have.
Just something like Hakkasan, if you had the full course, my God.
It's like express ghosting, isn't it? But the thing is, I think it's like, and it's almost, if you were to walk away on a date, you're like, I'm just not going to do it. It comes from a place of, I don't want to hurt their feelings, or I just don't want to have that awkward conversation, so I'm just going to remove myself from the situation instead of having it, right? But the thing with that is that, and I don't think that there's never any malice in it, right? So I don't think you wanted to hurt him. You just didn't want to have that awkward conversation, right? Yeah. And this is what happens with ghosting. That's why I tell people, do you know what? Because they're like, oh, you know what? I just don't want to hurt their feelings. So they think, oh, do you know, it's just easier to just slowly phase them out or phase myself out. But the thing is, when you do that, you're telling them two things. The first thing you're telling them is the obvious. I'm no longer interested. They know that because you just completely disappeared, right? But then what you're also telling them is that I care so little about you and how you feel and the time that we've spent together that I'm not even going to give you the basic decent human decency to say, you know what, I'm not interested. So guys, I also put the question to my audience about their best dates as well.
Yay.
So we had lots of lovely answers. Paris came up a few times. So I would say getting flown to countries is probably what people say is their best date. Yeah. But this one's a lovely one. Someone said, just a walk in the park having a lovely conversation. And I think, you know what, that was so lovely because I think we overthink things when it comes to dating, and it's like there's this pressure in guys to think, you know, I have to take her to this restaurant or fly her to Paris.
And a lot of women are bored by a lot of that sort of stuff.
And women, you know, because women are so like emotionally led as well. Sometimes just a nice conversation and your time, especially if you've been dating somebody for a while who money isn't an object. So flying you to Paris or here or there.
Doesn't have the same meaning.
It doesn't have the same meaning if money is not, you know, is not an object, is not a problem for you. So even just like stripping it back a bit. And, you know, as we said, in this current climate, guys, you know, we can't really afford a lot, guys. No. The electricities and the bills and everything.
But, and there's a
all the
big
money's
but.
going to bills.
It's very hard to make the first date like that. Would you go on a first
date
with a guy in a walk in the park?
That's not a date.
That's not a date.
You'd be bringing a policeman,
am I a squirrel? Why are we going to the park?
No, not a first date. Not a first date.
So it's not an option.
Well,
guys, to us for having this conversation.
I know, and I think that's a great place to start on a positive note. And I think we could all learn from each other. That's the takeaway message that I've received from this conversation. And I'd like to thank you guys so much for coming on the show. It has been absolutely amazing. We've covered so much. I feel like I can breathe now. But no, it's been amazing, and I loved both of you, and thank you for sharing your points of view. Every opinion was valid. We made some good points, and if you guys can let us know where we could find you, our listeners, our watchers, Chidera, give us all your info.
You can find me on the social media app like Instagram called @theslumflower, and you can find me in a bookshop. My book is called What a Time to Be Alone.
Oh, I'm going to get that book. I can't wait to read it.
I'll give you a copy. I'll sign it for you.
Yes. And mine's @Tre Lowe, TRELOWE on Instagram. I think possibly TikTok. You'll be waiting forever to see me post anything on there. But yeah, just Instagram pretty much is where you'll find me.
Spell it again.
TRELOWE @Tre Lowe.
Lovely, fantastic.
Send me a message, man. People to watch this and anything's come up for them and they want to get in touch, feel free, negative or positive.
Fantastic.
I think it's great that we've started a conversation that hopefully makes a difference, you know.
That's where you can find our guests, guys. Thank you everybody for tuning in. And don't forget to like, comment, share, and leave your review wherever you're watching or listening to our podcast. And we'll see you in the next episode.